The number on the screen. The number is 1202. It glows on a small display inside the lunar module, 240,000 miles from the room in which you are sitting. You do not see it appear. You hear it. A voice from the moon, thinned by distance and radio, reaches Houston through your headset. Program alarm. For a moment, nobody in your room moves. The lunar module is still descending. Its engine is still burning. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are standing inside it, watching the grey surface rise slowly toward them. Somewhere beneath that surface is a place where they are supposed to land. They have fuel for only a few more minutes. And now their computer is asking for attention. In the room ahead of yours, the guidance officer wants to know what the alarm means. A question moves backward through the voice loops until it reaches the people sitting around you. You are 25 years old. Beneath the glass covering your console is a handwritten page filled with numbers. You helped put them there after a simulation went badly wrong. You did not know then that one of those numbers would follow you all the way to this afternoon. 1202. You recognize it. But recognition is not the same as certainty. The room is waiting. The spacecraft is falling. And before your answer can travel to the moon, you must decide whether the machine is confused or dying before the answer. Before we find out what you say, I have a small question for you. Where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? Perhaps you are working late, taking a quiet break, or letting this story carry you towards sleep. If you feel like it, leave your place and time in the comments. There is something comforting about seeing all the different corners of the world where we meet in these quiet hours. And while you think about that, let us leave the alarm suspended for a little while. Let us go back to the first time you walked into this world of glowing numbers, unfamiliar voices, and machines that would have to work farther from home than any machine before them. The door you choose. You arrive in Houston with a university degree, a government job, and only a vague idea of where you are going. The air feels different from Michigan, warmer, heavier. The roads seem to stretch outward without deciding where the city ends. Somewhere ahead is the manned spacecraft center. Although much of it still looks less like the future than a collection of low buildings surrounded by flat land. You are 21 years old. NASA hired you to work on a large experimental computer. By the time you arrive, the money for that computer has disappeared. The job exists only on the paper that brought you south. A supervisor explains that NASA still wants you. It simply needs to find somewhere to put you. There are two possibilities. In one direction are the ground computers, enormous machines with rows of cabinets, cooling systems and teams of people, close enough to replace anything that fails. In the other direction are the flying computers. Those machines must leave Earth. They must fit inside a spacecraft, survive launch, and continue working where no technician can reach them. If one becomes confused above the moon, nobody can open a cabinet and look inside. You choose the computers that fly. At first, the decision does not feel historic. It feels like being shown two doors in an office and pointing toward the more interesting one. Soon you are sent away for training. New words arrive faster than you can organize them. Guidance, navigation, memory, interrupts, displays, programs. The computer has a language of verbs and nouns. It has far less memory than seems reasonable. It must carry out many jobs, although it can perform only one small piece of work at a time. You begin filling notebooks. Some evenings, the pages make sense. On others, they seem to contain nothing but arrows, leading to more arrows. Yet slowly, the machine develops a shape in your mind. Not its metal case, but its habits. You learn what it pays attention to, what it postpones, what it refuses to forget, and most importantly, what it does when too many things ask for its attention at once. You cannot know it yet, but this will become the question behind the number 1202. For now, however, it is simply another line in another notebook, and you are still the new engineer trying to understand a machine that is being taught how to land on the moon between Houston and Cambridge. The notebooks begin to travel with you. You carry them through weeks of training while information arrives faster than you can organize it. Hardware, software, guidance, memory, interfaces, failure modes. Years later, you will describe the experience as drinking from a fire hose. For now, you keep writing. The material is difficult, but it fits the interests already forming in your mind. When you return to Houston, you discover that the flood has given you an unusual view. You may not know every circuit as deeply as the hardware specialists, or every instruction as deeply as the programmers, but you can move between their worlds. You hear a hardware expert describe a signal, a programmer describe a scheduling problem, and an operations team describe what the astronauts will see. Beneath the different language, you recognize the same machine. That ability to translate is beginning to matter. It becomes clearest on your trips between Houston and Cambridge, Massachusetts, where the instrumentation laboratory is building the computer. You arrive with questions and leave with more of them. You read documentation, follow changes, and sit with people inventing methods that do not yet have decades of tradition behind them. Some enjoy teaching. Others would rather the young NASA representative move aside so they can return to work. You learn when to ask, when to listen, and which detail that seems small may become important somewhere far from Earth. Between those visits, Apollo changes scale in your mind. From a distance, the program is monumental. Rockets taller than buildings, launch towers, astronauts, television cameras, speeches about history. Up close, it is made of smaller things. A test result, a connector, a line of code, a disagreement about a procedure, a number copied onto paper. One person who notices that two measurements do not agree. This smaller Apollo suits you. You are not trying to become a public figure. You are learning how the machine behaves, what it remembers, what it abandons, and how to explain that behavior to someone who may have only seconds to decide. Learning the machine's habits. The more time you spend with the flying computer, the less it resembles the enormous machines you first encountered at university. Those machines live in rooms. This one must live in a spacecraft. Its memory must survive vibration, radiation, silence, and distance. The fixed instructions are woven into small magnetic cores, wire passing through one core and around another. The program is not merely stored in the machine. In a physical sense, it is part of the machine. There is only a small amount of erasable memory, the kind the computer can change while it works. Every temporary value needs a place. Every program must know when it may use that place and when it must surrender it. You learn the astronaut's side of the conversation too. They speak to the computer through a display and keyboard called the DISS key, entering numbered verbs and nouns. A verb asks the machine to act. A noun tells it what information the action concerns. The exchange is brief, exact, and unlike any ordinary conversation. But the habit that stays with you is simpler than all the unfamiliar vocabulary. The computer knows that its jobs are not equally important. Steering the spacecraft matters more than refreshing a display. Keeping track of motion matters more than finishing a calculation that can safely be requested again. When urgent work arrives, the machine can interrupt something less important, and if too many jobs gather at once, it can clear unfinished work, return to a known point, and begin again with the jobs that keep the spacecraft flying. The engineers call this a restart. The word sounds alarming, but it does not mean that the computer forgets where it is and wakes above the moon with an empty mind. It means that the crowded desk is cleared, and the most important folders are placed back first. You begin to understand the questions hidden inside every alarm. Not only what went wrong, but what survived? What returned? Is the machine still doing the work that cannot wait? Years of engineering have been compressed into those questions. One day, you will have only seconds to answer them. The landing that ended too soon. Long before anyone says 12:02 during the real landing, another lunar module is already descending toward another moon. This moon exists only inside a simulation. Its surface cannot kill anyone. Its failures are invented. Yet the voices, consoles, procedures, and decisions are treated as though the spacecraft were real. Before Apollo 11, Mission Control rehearses the landing again and again. The simulations are not simple demonstrations. Trainers introduce failures to test the astronauts, flight controllers, procedures, and support teams. Sensors lie. Communications disappear. Equipment fails. A system that looked healthy moments earlier begins producing impossible readings. The purpose is not to make people look clever. It is to expose uncertainty while the lunar module is still on Earth. You take part from the support rooms. Because relatively few people understand the onboard computers, trainers sometimes ask computer specialists to suggest failures. They change the details so that the support team cannot recognize its own idea too easily. The people who design problems are tested along with everyone else. In one rehearsal, shortly before Apollo 11, a computer alarm appears during a simulated descent. Steve Bales recommends an abort. In the simulation, that is the wrong decision. Gene Kranz sees a larger problem. What does each number mean? What could cause it? What would the computer do next? Would the spacecraft remain controllable? Could the mission continue, even if the precise cause remained unknown? This last question is unusually important. During a real landing, there may not be time to diagnose an electrical interaction or trace the history of a scheduling request. Operations sometimes requires a decision based on consequences rather than causes. You may not know why an alarm appeared. You still need to know whether landing can continue. The support team studies the code and the recovery behavior. The results are written down. The handwritten list is placed beneath the protective glass on the console, where it can be reached quickly. 12:01, 12:02. Executive overflow alarms. If they occur occasionally and the computer restarts cleanly, the system may continue. If they arrive repeatedly without enough time between them, the computer may become unable to complete even high-priority guidance. The distinction is not dramatic on paper. It is conditional. Watch the rate. Watch the spacecraft. Watch the recovery. The list waits beneath glass. 4 days between worlds. Apollo 11 leaves Earth on July 16th. From the launch site in Florida, the Saturn V rises slowly at first. Its movement looks almost reluctant because the rocket is so large and the camera is so far away. Then the vehicle climbs past the tower, rolls toward its course, and carries the crew beyond the atmosphere. You do not experience the launch as a single spectacle. It reaches you through stages, pressures, trajectories, engine status, communications and calls exchanged between consoles. Each portion of the rocket completes its work and falls away. The spacecraft enters Earth orbit, then fires another stage to begin the journey toward the Moon. For the crew, the next days contain checklists, navigation, meals, broadcasts, observation, and rest. For the people on the ground, they contain shifts. Teams enter mission control, accept responsibility from the previous team, follow the spacecraft for hours, and hand it onward. The mission never sleeps as a whole. You are not needed at the console every moment. Your work concentrates around phases in which the onboard computers and guidance systems become especially important. Still, the flight remains in the background. Apollo 11 is not a distant news event for you. It is a running system whose state is passed from person to person. The spacecraft coasts through a region where Earth gradually becomes smaller behind it and the Moon grows ahead. There is no road, but there is a carefully maintained trajectory. Small errors measured early can be corrected before they become large. Navigation combines observations made by the crew, tracking from Earth, and calculations performed by computers on the ground and onboard. Inside the command module, the crew uses another Apollo guidance computer, related to the one that will fly Eagle. The machines are not controlling everything alone. They are part of a partnership. Human beings select programs, enter commands, verify results, and compare the computer's version of reality with other evidence. Near the Moon, Apollo 11 fires its service propulsion engine and enters lunar orbit. The crew passes behind the Moon and disappears from radio contact during each orbit. The loss of signal is predictable, but the silence never becomes entirely casual. You know when contact should return. The expected minute arrives. You wait with the room. Antennas listen. The spacecraft reappears. Armstrong and Aldrin move into Eagle. The lunar module has traveled folded behind the command module, protected during launch, and then extracted after leaving Earth. Now it becomes an independent spacecraft. The interior is crowded with panels, handles, hoses, checklists, cameras, bags, and equipment. It is built for a very specific sequence. Separate, descend, support 2 people on the surface, lift its upper stage, and rendezvous with Columbia. It does not need a heat shield for return to Earth. It does not need wings. Every object is judged against mass, reliability, and purpose. Armstrong stands on the left. Aldrin stands on the right. Between and around them are controls for guidance, propulsion, communications, electrical power, and life support. The DISS key gives them direct access to the guidance computer, using its language of numbered verbs and nouns. When Eagle separates, Collins inspects it from Columbia. The 2 spacecraft move apart. For the first time in the mission, the crew is divided between vehicles. From Houston, the separation is another transition reflected in voice and data. Different systems become active. Different failure paths become possible. The lunar module is no longer cargo. It is flying. The descent orbit insertion burn lowers Eagle's path so that it will approach the surface. Again, the spacecraft passes behind the Moon, out of contact. Armstrong and Aldrin perform the maneuver without mission control listening live. When Eagle emerges, Houston receives the evidence that it is where it should be. The landing team prepares for powered descent. The room. Behind the room. From photographs, mission control looks like a single room. From your chair, you know the photograph leaves things out. It shows rows of consoles descending toward enormous displays. Men in white shirts and narrow ties. headsets pressed against one ear, ashtrays and coffee cups beside stacks of paper. It shows the flight director at the center of a web of voices. But the famous room is only the visible layer. Behind it, physically and organizationally, are support rooms filled with more engineers, more displays, more reference material, and more voice loops. The people here rarely speak to the astronauts. Most do not speak directly to the flight director. Their work moves forward through the controllers in the front room. You sit in one of those back rooms. You do not describe yourself as a flight controller. The formal console position belongs to Steve Bales, the guidance officer, who watches the guidance and navigation systems and reports to Gene Kranz. You watch the same spacecraft from a narrower angle. Your attention stays close to the onboard computers, their programs, memory, rhythms, warnings, and the strange ways they can continue after something goes wrong. That division matters. The landing will not be saved by a sentence passing directly from one heroic person to the moon. It will be managed through a chain. Voices reach you from Eagle through Charlie Duke, the capsule communicator, and the controllers in the front room. If guidance needs help, Steve turns to the back room. You interpret what the computer is doing. Steve weighs that advice against the spacecraft's behavior. Gene Kranz oversees the room. Charlie carries the final response back to the crew. Each link is small. Together, they form the nervous system of the mission. The voice channels make this structure audible. One loop carries the conversation with the spacecraft. Another connects controllers to the flight director. Others run backward into support rooms where questions can be asked without crowding the main channel. When several people repeat the same answer, the words appear to move through the building. Back room to front room, guidance to flight, flight to Capcom, Capcom to the moon. The distance to the spacecraft introduces a pause. A radio signal traveling at the speed of light still needs more than a second to cross the space between Earth and Moon. A question comes down. People in Houston hear it after it has already been spoken. The answer climbs back across the same distance. Even before anyone thinks, the conversation contains silence. Those small delays make calm communication essential. There is no benefit in filling the gap with panic. While a reply travels, the spacecraft continues moving. You understand this, partly because computers also live through carefully arranged intervals. The Apollo guidance computer does not experience the landing as one continuous sweep. It samples information, performs calculations, sends commands, and begins again. It repeatedly asks, in effect, where am I? Where am I going? What must happen next? People in mission control do something similar. Read the instruments, compare them with predictions, decide whether the difference matters. Send the next instruction, watch again. It is a loop of observation and correction stretched across almost 500,000 miles of round-trip distance. By July 20th, this layered system has been operating for hours. Columbia circles above with Collins. Eagle has separated. Armstrong and Aldrin are preparing to descend. In every room, responsibility narrows toward the next 12 minutes. From your chair, you cannot see the lunar surface. You see its effects translated into numbers. Altitude, velocity, position, computer status, radar measurements, engine commands. The moon enters mission control as data. This is why your work matters. Between the physical spacecraft and the people responsible for it stands a collection of machines. The computers on board Eagle turn sensor readings into guidance. Computers on Earth process tracking information and display the results. Human beings read those displays, recognize patterns, and decide whether the machines are still telling a coherent story. So you sit in the room behind the room and listen. The landing has not yet begun. The number 1202 has not yet appeared. Beneath the glass, the handwritten alarm list waits without urgency. It is an ordinary page. For a little while longer. Gene Kranz's white team occupies the front room. Steve Bales is at guidance. Charlie Duke is Capcom. In the support area, you and the other backroom specialists settle into the familiar arrangement of displays, paper, and loops. You have seen versions of this moment many times. In simulations, the lunar module descends. A failure appears. Controllers diagnose it. Sometimes the landing continues. Sometimes an abort sends the simulated crew back toward orbit. The room stops, resets, and later tries again. Today, no reset exists, but the procedures are the same. That is the point of rehearsal. The real mission is not the moment to invent a new style of working. People sit where they trained to sit. Information follows the channels built for it. Questions move to the people prepared to answer. You check the material under the glass. The alarm list is only one part of the console, but you know where it is. Far above the moon, Eagle turns to the proper attitude. The descent engine is ready. The guidance program counts toward ignition. The long coast between worlds is ending. The next 12 minutes will carry the spacecraft from orbit to the surface. The last 12 minutes. On July 20th, Eagle disappears behind the moon and the radio falls silent. Houston knows exactly why. The moon itself is standing between the spacecraft and Earth. When the signal returns, Armstrong and Aldrin are standing inside a cabin with no conventional seats, their boots secured to the floor. Below them, the descent engine points toward the moon. Farther above, Michael Collins circles alone in Columbia. The descent engine ignites. The landing program moves through its phases. The engine throttles. Radar measurements become important. Eagle slowly sheds altitude and horizontal velocity as it follows a curved path toward the surface. From the support room, you listen to voices that remain deliberately plain. Numbers are spoken. Milestones are acknowledged. Small differences between radar altitude and the guidance estimate are monitored. Communications briefly become awkward as the spacecraft's orientation affects its antenna connection with Earth. Nothing about the voices suggests that history is required to sound historical while it happens. The crew is working. The controllers are working. The computer is working. Near the moon, the guidance calculations become more frequent. Earlier, the computer could perform a major cycle, approximately every 2 seconds. Closer to the ground, it needs finer control and begins cycling more often, about once per second. Its workload rises. This is expected. Engineers know that the busiest portion of the landing will leave less spare capacity. Some less important work can be reduced. The margins have been studied. Somewhere inside the flow of electrical signals, however, the computer is being asked to perform work that nobody intended. The requests are small enough to remain invisible. For now. Nobody in the support room knows this. Nobody inside Eagle knows it. The machine simply keeps accepting each request while the landing program asks more and more of it. At last, there is not enough time for everything. The computer clears the unfinished work. It restores the jobs with the highest priority. Guidance returns. Engine control returns. Then the machine does one more important thing. It informs the crew. Eagle continues descending. The master, caution and warning system activates. A light appears. A tone enters the headsets inside Eagle. Armstrong's voice reaches Earth. Program alarm. The room becomes attentive in a new way. The next words identify the number. 12:02, the page beneath the glass. The moment you left suspended has caught up with you. It is here now, beneath your eyes, while Eagle continues descending. The list tells you what the number means. Executive overflow. The computer has tried to begin a job and cannot find the temporary memory it needs. So it does what it was designed to do. It restarts. But the number alone is not the decision. You follow the restart in your mind. Unfinished lower priority jobs fall away. Guidance returns. Engine control returns. If the overload leaves enough space between alarms, the machine can recover. The radio delay itself offers a clue. By the time the alarm is heard in Houston and a response begins moving back toward the moon, several seconds have passed. Eagle has not tumbled. The data has not dissolved into nonsense. The guidance solution remains coherent. Steve is watching those values. The spacecraft is stable. The computer has returned to work. On the backroom loop, you tell him the condition for continuing. As long as it does not recur too often, it is fine. There is no time to discover the physical source. The cause remains hidden. The consequences are visible. The computer has overloaded. The computer has restarted. The high-priority work has resumed. The lunar module is still flying. Steve combines the alarm interpretation with the guidance data and passes the recommendation forward. The response moves through the chain to Charlie Duke and then across the radio distance to Eagle. Continue. The entire exchange occupies only seconds, but those seconds contain years of design, testing, training, and rehearsal. The engineer who created the restart points is not speaking on the loop. The people who wove the fixed memory are not in the room. The programmers who prioritized the landing jobs are listening elsewhere. The trainers who introduced the earlier simulation failure are not part of the radio exchange. Gene Kranz's demand for an alarm list is not repeated aloud. All of that work is present anyway. It is compressed into the answer. Eagle continues downward. The alarm returns. Then the alarm appears again. The same number. This matters because your advice was conditional. An occasional restart can clear the congestion. Continuous restarts could prevent the computer from completing even the work it preserves. The support team watches. Between alarms, the computer performs guidance. The lunar module remains stable. The trajectory data still makes sense. The overload is recurring, but not continuously. The answer remains go. Minutes later, another alarm appears. 12:01. It is a different number but the same family of problem. This time, the scheduling request has run out of a larger temporary workspace. The recovery logic is the same. The decision is the same. You call into the backroom loop. Same type. Steve repeats it in the front room. Charlie Duke repeats it toward the spacecraft. For a moment, you hear your conclusion echo outward through the system, each person carrying it one level closer to the moon. Same type. The phrase does not mean the alarm is unimportant. It means the team understands how to classify it. A new number has not created a new mystery. The computer is reporting another symptom of the overload already being managed. Eagle is now much closer to the surface. The guidance computer has helped bring the spacecraft through the braking phase. It begins rotating the lunar module, so Armstrong can see forward. The moon rises into the windows. And the problem changes. The computer is still recovering from overloads, but the place toward which it is guiding Eagle is filled with rocks, the place beyond the crater. At several thousand feet, Armstrong finally gains a useful view of the landing area. The alarms have consumed time and attention that would normally have been used to study the terrain earlier. Now the lunar module is descending toward the edge of a crater surrounded by boulders. Some are large enough to damage a landing leg or the engine bell. The guidance computer has not failed. Its estimate has brought Eagle into the planned landing region, but the computer cannot evaluate rocks the way a pilot looking through the window can. Its target is a coordinate, not a safe patch of ground understood in human terms. Armstrong takes a more active role. He checks manual control, then begins flying beyond the crater. The lunar module tips gently, using thrust not only to slow its descent, but to travel horizontally over the surface. Aldrin remains focused on instruments. He calls altitude, descent rate, forward velocity, and other values. Armstrong looks outside for a clear area. Mission Control watches fuel and trajectory. From the back room, your part of the landing has become quieter. The alarms may recur, but the classification is known. The guidance system is functioning. Armstrong has control. There is little anyone in Houston can do to choose the final patch of lunar ground. You listen. Altitude falls through hundreds of feet. The boulder field passes beneath the spacecraft. Fuel decreases. Dust. The descent engine throws dust outward in a widening sheet. With no air, the dust does not billow like smoke. Grains move in low, fast paths across the surface. Inside Eagle, Aldrin notices it. Dust. The word reaches the support room and changes the reality of the scene. You have watched hundreds of simulated landings. Simulations include engine behavior, guidance, computer displays, failures, and procedures. They can feel remarkably complete, but nobody says they have dust. Dust belongs only to the moon. For a moment, the distinction between rehearsal and reality becomes unmistakable. This is not another exercise that can be reset. The lunar module is physically disturbing a surface no human being has touched. You are no longer advising a decision. You are listening to the final seconds. A probe beneath one of the landing legs touches the ground. Aldrin reports the contact. Armstrong shuts down the descent engine. The weight of the spacecraft settles into the landing gear under lunar gravity. In Houston, confirmation passes through the loops. The Eagle has landed. The room releases a breath it seems to have been holding for the entire descent. People smile, shake hands, speak over one another, and then return to procedure, because landing is not the end of the mission. The spacecraft must remain safe. Systems must be checked. The crew must prepare for the work on the surface, and later, for ascent. In the support room, the computer question remains. Eagle is on the moon, but nobody yet knows why its guidance computer repeatedly ran out of time on the way down, and the same machine will be needed to leave while the moon sleeps. The descent engine is quiet now, but the question inside the alarm is not. Eagle must still leave the moon. Before it does, people in Houston and Cambridge need to understand what stole the computer's time. Almost immediately, engineers begin reconstructing what happened. The alarm list explained how to respond, not why the overload existed. During the descent, that distinction was enough. After landing, it is not. Eagle must lift from the surface, rendezvous with Columbia, and bring Armstrong and Aldrin back to Michael Collins. The rendezvous radar, computer, guidance programs, and procedures will all matter again. In Houston, recorded voice loops are replayed. Telemetry is examined. Specialists compare the timing of alarms with the sequence of computer operations. At the MIT Instrumentation Laboratory, engineers work through the night. They use simulations, program listings, telemetry words, and knowledge of the hardware interfaces. They ask what could consume enough computer time to push a heavily loaded but tested landing program beyond 100%. The answer emerges from the rendezvous radar. The radar switch was not simply left in an obviously careless position. The crew procedure placed it in a configuration intended for the mission sequence, but an electrical condition in the interface allowed tiny fluctuations to generate repeated requests for computer attention. The computer kept receiving interruptions telling it that a radar-related value had changed slightly. Add 1, subtract 1, add 1 again. The changes were noise. Over time, they meant almost nothing. Processing them consumed roughly 14 or 15% of the computer's time. During a comfortable phase of flight, that hidden workload might remain invisible. During the final descent, when the guidance cycle accelerated and useful work already consumed most of the computer, the extra interruptions pushed demand just beyond capacity. The system reached the beginning of a new cycle before it had completed the old one. It restarted. For a few seconds, the queue was clean. Then the unnecessary work accumulated again. Another restart followed. This explains the spacing of the alarms. The computer was not permanently frozen. It was slightly overloaded, repeatedly catching itself, clearing the excess, and returning to flight control. The alarms were unsettling because the system was close to its limit. The recovery was impressive because the limit did not become a cliff. Lower priority work could fall away while guidance continued. The machine degraded gracefully. It did less, but it kept doing what mattered most. Before ascent, the relevant radar configuration can be changed. The needless interruptions will not burden the computer in the same way. The ascent from the moon proceeds without a repeat of the landing alarms. The people inside the answer. Later, people will try to place the answer inside a single name. In the hours after the landing, it does not feel that way. It feels like a chain whose links are only visible when you follow the voices backward. Follow the answer backward, and you find the designers who gave the computer priorities and restart protection, the programmers who kept guidance above expendable work, the people who built its memory, and the simulation teams who forced failure into the room before failure could arrive from the moon. You find Gene Kranz refusing to waste a mistaken abort, and support engineers turning that lesson into a page beneath glass. Follow the answer forward, and it passes through you, Steve Bales, Charlie Duke, and finally, Armstrong and Aldrin, who look at their own instruments and continue flying. After the landing, a recording of the backroom loop is played for people who had heard only the front room communications. They discover the rapid conversation that supported the guidance call. The famous answer had a hidden history only a few seconds long. You do not yet know how often the event will be retold. At 25, you have been at NASA for only 3 years. Your immediate task is to understand the overload and make sure the next phase is safe. History is not an atmosphere inside the room. It is something other people will apply later. So you continue working. The journey home. The astronauts walk on the moon. They collect samples, photograph the surface, deploy experiments, and speak to Earth. Later, Eagle's ascent stage lifts away, leaving the descent stage behind. Armstrong and Aldrin rendezvous with Collins in Columbia. The crew begins the journey home. The alarm sheet remains a piece of engineering material. Its significance lies not in being prophetic, but in being ready. The mission continues for several more days. Columbia leaves lunar orbit and begins falling homeward. The path that once carried the crew away from Earth now bends back toward it. The command module enters the atmosphere, protected by its heat shield, while the service module is released. Parachutes open above the Pacific. The capsule settles into the ocean. Only then is the journey physically complete. For the engineering teams, it continues through reports, explanations, corrections, and preparation for later flights. The alarm event is examined not as a curious anecdote, but as a near miss that can improve future systems. What else could steal computer time? How much overload could a flight computer survive? Which functions should disappear first when resources become scarce? You become one of the people able to translate the answers for senior managers and other engineering groups. The experience is not comfortable at first. You are still young. Explaining a complicated event to people with greater authority and different technical backgrounds. But translation is part of the work. A solution that cannot be understood by the people responsible for acting on it remains incomplete. The years pass. Apollo gives way to other programs. The lessons of priority, recovery, and graceful degradation travel into later spacecraft and into your work on the space shuttle. You remain at NASA for decades, eventually serving as Chief Information Officer at Johnson Space Center. The landing becomes history, while your working life continues. Long afterward, people ask about 1201 and 1202. Friends print the numbers on a shirt. Interviews preserve memories of the backroom loop, the alarm list, the repeated phrase moving toward the moon. And the strange instant when the word dust made the real landing feel more real than every simulation. The story remains vivid because it is a story about seconds. But the seconds only make sense when placed beside the years that prepared them, what the little computer kept. Much later, when the landing has become history, one detail continues to return to you. The computer succeeded without completing everything it had been asked to do. When demand exceeded capacity, it did not pretend that all work was equally urgent. It did not freeze while protecting an impossible schedule. It discarded incomplete lower priority work, restored essential programs, and continued guiding the spacecraft. The alarms told the humans that this was happening. The lesson followed you beyond Apollo. Later, spacecraft computers were tested under stolen processing time to discover how they behaved as capacity disappeared. Displays might stop updating before flight control failed. Less urgent work could fall away in stages. The goal was to avoid a system that looked perfect until the instant it collapsed. Reliability does not always mean preventing every problem. Some problems cannot be predicted in their exact form. Reliability can mean recognizing trouble, preserving what matters, recovering from a known point, and informing the people responsible. The landing is often described as a triumph of courage. And it was. It was also a triumph of preparation that looked ordinary until the moment it was used. A simulation that went badly. A flight director who refused to waste the lesson. A team that studied impossible alarms. A handwritten page beneath glass. A computer designed to forget some work and continue. A question passing from the moon. An answer moving through several rooms and back across space. And a young engineer watching the intervals between warnings, realizing that the machine was still doing the one thing it absolutely had to do: fly. The dust has settled. It is late now, at least in the quiet place from which you are listening. In the story, the lunar module rests on the sea of tranquility. Its descent engine is silent. Dust disturbed by the landing has fallen back to the surface. There is no wind to move it again. Inside Eagle, the computer remains powered. Its memory contains programs woven into physical form and changing values held in a small erasable space. The overload has passed. The most urgent work of the descent is complete. In Houston, the rooms remain active. The Great Wall displays continue glowing. Headsets remain connected. Papers are turned. Telemetry arrives. The mission has changed from landing to surface operations, and soon it will change again toward ascent and rendezvous. In the support room, the page beneath the glass is still where it was before the alarm. 12:01, 12:02. Numbers that, for a few seconds, held several possible futures. You were not alone in choosing between them. The answer belonged to a chain of people and to a machine built by thousands more. Your part was to recognize what the computer was saying, explain what its recovery meant, and pass that understanding one room forward. That was enough. The message traveled. The landing continued. And on the moon, 2 people arrived safely, while a small computer quietly let go of everything it did not need. There is nothing more you need to hold on to tonight. The alarms have been understood. The engine is still. The dust has settled. Good night.